So we're starting the regular meeting of the Bennington School District Board of Directors. It's December 5th. It is 7:02. So thanks everyone for coming. Could I please have a motion to amend the agenda? The motion that I'm looking for is to, our first agenda item is an executive session as per subsection 313A2 for negotiating real estate. We also need to add one for A10, which is municipal or school security or emergency response measures, the disclosure of which could jeopardize public safety. So could I please have a motion to amend the agenda?
So moved.
Thank you. Could I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion on that?
Just that I will not be participating in the discussion regarding the real estate.
Right. So we'll excuse Dan from that, but we'll have you join us for the other piece. So as long as there's no discussion, could I please, everyone in favor of amending the agenda as described, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, it carries, and the agenda is so modified. So agenda item 1, executive session. So could I have a motion to move into executive session, please? Could I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of moving into executive session, please say aye. Any opposed? And we are in executive session. Thanks. Motion, please, to come out of executive session.
So moved.
Thanks. Could I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion about coming out of executive session? Hearing none, all those in favor of coming out of executive session, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Very good. So we are out of executive session. So agenda item number 2, public comments. Are there any public comments? Hearing none. Moving on to the consent agenda. A brief consent agenda. There is a leave of absence request and a nomination for a maintenance worker within the BSD. So could I please have a motion to accept the consent agenda, please?
So moved.
Could I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of accepting the consent agenda, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none. The consent agenda is adopted. Item number 4, finance. There's a treasurer's report that was published with the board docs. Any questions or comments on the treasurer's report? Very good. Hearing none. Moving on to number 5, facilities. The board has elected to take no action on the Orchard Road Town Garage salt shed. There is an agreement with the town to allow us to use that property for the remainder of this winter. So our salt needs are taken care of, our parking needs are taken care of for Molly. The general consensus is that because this board is going to cease to be, and there's going to be a consolidated board, that it would be irresponsible of this board to take on any kind of long-term leases with the town or any other entity, and we're not in a position to be taking on any other debt in terms of purchases. So that's that matter settled. Agenda item number 6, policies, 5600. The student freedom of expression in school-sponsored media policy. That policy, as it stands right now, simply refers to Title 16, Vermont's statutes annotated, subsection 1623. And there was discussion about taking the text of that statute and making that admin regs.
So just a quick question. Are they going to take it off of the state website and deposit it onto the policy versus having a hyperlink on there the way it currently sets now?
That was not the discussion. The discussion in the policy committee was to keep the policy as it's written with just a reference to that statute, but then taking the language and sticking that in admin regs. So could I have a motion to warn policy 5600, please?
So moved.
Could I have a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you. Any discussion about warning 5600?
I have discussion.
Yes, please.
I think that they should add the actual verbiage into the policy instead of just a hyperlink.
Okay.
I think the policy should read what the state says
Yep.
in the actual policy versus a clickable link.
So-
I think it just to keep the format the same from policy to policy.
Right.
It's nice now that we can open the policy and you have it directly in front of you versus a hyperlink.
And the comment at the policy committee meeting was that it looks nude, I think was the term that was used.
That's a good
as it stands
statement,
right now.
yeah, but I just think it looks a little irresponsible, because then if the state changes something within it, then is that the assumption that our policy changed as well?
Yeah,
I
so
think it should actually be physically written in the policy. Then if the state makes changes, we have to warn it and then vote on it again with the new changes versus them changing their website and us not knowing.
Right. So, okay. So I'm curious then, Meredith, so I can certainly carry that comment back to the policy committee, and I'm happy to do that. I'm wondering if you can second, I'm wondering if your intention is to vote against warning it as it is, and if that's your intention,
I
can
was
you
going to
second the
warn
motion?
it, but I was seconding it with the intention to warn it. However,
Amend it.
can we not, can we amend the motion by saying it needs to actually say,
I mean, I can certainly bring that back.
Does that make sense?
I think one thing we could do is table action on warning it, and I can bring those comments back to the committee and go from there.
I wouldn't want to, yeah, if that's what we need to do, I wouldn't want to slow the process down, because it's not that I disagree with the policy, it's just I don't like the format.
Okay.
Is the intent of the policy to follow, though, the state?
Yeah.
Because, I mean, I think probably the intent by putting in the link is to negate the fact of having to update it and warn it every
Yeah, and I
time
think that looks sloppy.
it changes from a
Because then
state
what if we don't
perspective.
agree to what the state has made a change to 3 years from now, 5
But
years
I
from now?
think that depends on the intent of the policy. If the intent on the policy is to be in line with the state, then
Oh, there you go then.
Is there excellent?
But if I'm a parent and I access the policy, I'm going to want to read it. I don't want to go to a hyperlink.
Yeah, I
want
know.
to read the policy.
So I think
If it's
once,
your policy, it should be
I'm
written.
fine with it either way, but I'm just
What the
indicating
intention
what the
was?
intent of, what was the intent of putting the hyperlink.
I just think format should be the same across the board for every policy. If we're going to spell out what we're agreeing to district-wide, it's this. It's what's in front of you. It's not a clickable link. That's all I'm thinking.
so this is what I would propose. Why don't we have the folks who made the motion and seconded the motion withdraw the motion right now. We table action on this. At the January policy meeting, I bring these concerns to the committee and we see what sugar's out from there.
So,
Jill, I think you made that motion.
Yeah, that's fine.
yeah.
They weren't clear whether they're going to meet in January.
Fair enough. So January or February. So with that motion taken away, anyone else want to make a motion to warn this? And if not, we're going to move on. Very good. So item number 7, the SVSU. Would Dan or Chayla like to speak to that?
I'm assuming that Jim is going to cover most of what we covered in SVSU in your chair's report, so I'm thinking that,
As far as the,
I mean, not the chair's report, the
Yeah.
superintendent's
Yes.
report in terms of Act 46 and
Yes.
all of that stuff. So that was the big focus of that meeting, so a lot of that discussion. So I'd probably say I'd be being redundant and stealing some of your thunder, so.
And we talked about the budget.
The budget.
Renee did that already, so. yeah.
Anything else? Okay. We're not, so our principals reported during the budget meeting, which began at 6, so they have been dismissed. Thank you to them for their hard work. And turning now, agenda item number 9,
to my thunder.
to your
Yes. Bring it down.
So as discussed at the SU meeting, first thing about Act 46. We start the last state board meeting. As is the right of the state board, they voted, they changed boundary lines and added Arlington and Sandgate to our supervisory union beginning in 2021. They voted to give Arlington 3 seats and Sandgate 1, which I pointed out that meeting was, at the state board meeting, it's not how we are organized, it's 2 with 1 alternate. So I sent the Secretary of Education all the minutes from the state board meeting in February 2013, which outlined when the state board took a vote at that time to alter the board makeup of the Southwest Vermont Supervisory Union, because my understanding is the difficulty that they had in getting a quorum. So the response I got back from the Secretary of Education is that we're still going to have to ask, which the state board has the right to do, to make a motion and vote change the makeup of the board. So that letter was sent to the state board Friday. signed by myself and the SU board chair, drafted by our attorney, asking for the board, state board to consider at their December meeting that they would take a vote to align Arlington's representation on the SU equal to everybody else, which would be 2 and 1 alternate, and Sandgate would have 1 because they're non-operating, and they would have 1 alternate. So that's the news on the supervisory front. As far as Act 46 and its impact on this board, you heard a little bit of this talk during the budget. Up until last Friday, we weren't sure if we were going to tell you to stop forming a budget because it was all the work of the new entity, but the direction we got back that the individual boards should continue to do the work on the budget, which you'll be handing off to what will become known as the Transitional Board, which will probably have their first meeting in January. There's a timeline of how soon I can have it. I have to have it by a certain date, but in January. So my guess is somewhere in the vicinity of January 15th, the Transitional Board will have their first meeting. I hope to have that finalized by the end of this week, middle of next week. And Transitional Board, as I've said before, is made up of the chair and clerk of the 4 forming boards.
We don't have a clerk.
Yes, you do.
Yes, you
Yeah,
do,
you
Jack.
must.
Oh,
Yeah.
I thought we didn't have a clerk.
No,
We didn't for a
clerk.
while.
We didn't,
Jack
right?
the other.
Oh, you offered
So
this year.
it's
okay.
who the chair and clerk are as of the record of July 1 of 18. So that's who has it. And if one of them do not want to serve, then the board can make accommodations to elect someone else to serve. That Transitional Board, made up of the chair and clerk of the forming boards, you're one of the forming boards, will then, their most immediate task will be to decide whether you want to bring before the voters to amend the Articles of Agreement. The Articles of Agreement, which I received on Monday of this week, gives Bennington 2 seats on this hybrid model board. And everyone gets 2 seats, where as you know, I know I'm repeating myself, but it's an important issue that should be repeated. In our articles from our Act 46 Study Committee was 1 for Woodford and 2 for all towns except Bennington, which would have 4. And everyone was in agreement on that Act 46 Study Committee. So, and that has to happen relatively quick. So if the Transitional Board, if a majority of the Transitional Board does not want to warn a vote on that, then it doesn't happen. But it does have to happen by, I think, February 28th. So that would be your first order of business. The second would be the budget of the new entity, the new district. And they have given us a name. We are the Southwest Vermont Union Elementary School District. The new Transitional Board can also vote to change that, so they give us a forming. The initial board is the next board that gets formed, and that'll be the first board that is elected by the electorate. So that has to happen by June, no later than June, but I imagine it will happen much sooner than that. I know that Renee is in a little panic for budget timelines. It is possible that we will do it at the March town meeting day, unless there is a vote to amend the Articles of Agreement first. Then that probably will push the vote for the budget back.
So Jim, can I ask a question? And I think you answered this at SVSU, but I just want to make sure I understood. So the vote that would take place to amend the articles, that would be a vote by everybody in all the
By
towns, and it would be
Australian
total
ballot.
population, right? It wouldn't
Yes,
be like.
Right, it's not going to be, because this is a unified school district, so the vote, even on budgets going forward and everything like that, will be the majority vote.
In all.
In all. It's not like all 4 towns vote separately and then has to pass them. Yeah.
Okay.
No.
I just wanted to make sure that was clear.
So, The other thing, the thing that I want to mention to you tonight is, so I told you I received the draft articles agreement on Monday, and as I'm reading it, one of the mistakes that I see in it is the entity, the new entity, the Southwest Vermont Union Elementary School District has responsibility for teaching, educating pre-K through grade 6, and it lists all 4 towns, which includes Bennington. So
I was going to ask you about that.
yeah, so I have sent an email to both Donna Russo-Savage from the Department of Education and to Dan French asking for clarification on that, because what we had always been told, those who were on the Act 46, was, no, that's nothing to worry about. We understand that difference. You're all elementary schools. Things can stay just the way they are. And I hope that that is still true, and it just needs to be a language clarification, because we certainly don't have the capacity to bring the 6th graders
back to
back here. And so we also are starting to, Renee also said we have 2 contracts coming up for review, sports staff and teachers, and I'm not sure if we're going to have to impact bargain on some things. There's everything from seniority list to, so we have a meeting with the Teachers Association on Monday to talk about, Tuesday, to talk about what some of those issues may look like. And the Articles of Agreement say every contract that's in place stays in place until they expire. So, of course, the teacher's contract expires at the same time that we go live as the new school district. So I don't think anything is insurmountable, and it may not all have to happen at once, but, like right now, seniority is by school district. The only one that really has movement between buildings is Bennington, because you have 3 buildings, but Pownell seniority list rests in Pownell, so now there's a new entity. Some would think that it becomes one seniority list, and that is probably something that's going to have to be bargained and not just assumed.
We did that with the paraeducators, though,
Yes, we did, but
And-
that was in negotiations.
in negotiations.
Yeah, because that in this
Looking
case all
forward
became
to Act
issue.
46. So that's why we did it,
Yeah,
basically.
yeah. And I will have a meeting in just got some dates from the superintendent of Arlington. The chair of the Arlington board would like to meet, their SU board with our chair and the 2 superintendents to have some preliminary discussions. I let them know that my first priority is the work for the consolidation of the 4 districts, the forming districts, I'll use the right name.
Right.
But I guess what we're all need to start to wrap our heads around is the entities as we know it, or have a sunset to them. They're all going to expire on June 30th, and I am concerned about the budgets. So, Renee and principals, some include putting a lot of work together on these budgets. The board, you're going to have a budget. You identified your needs, and then it's going to go to a transitional board, in which there's only going to be 2 Bennington representatives. And how this all merges together. You would think that, we'll just take, line item, 1,200 of all 4 boards and merge it into one new 1,200 line item and be done with it. But there will be, there's differences in every school district as far as even what personnel are called in different buildings, particularly around support staff. So that's all going to have to be worked out. So I just hope that we all enter this process with open minds and a willingness to work together. Any questions, I'd be glad to answer, but it will be the next month. It's going to have a lot of timelines once I don't want to announce timelines until I'm absolutely sure what they are, because I'm seeking guidance from the state and our attorney at the same time, and they're not all concurring.
So any questions for Superintendent Culkeen?
How long do you anticipate the transitional board will be banded?
Well, if there's an initial board elected in March, then the transitional board is done
Already
then.
discounted?
Yeah, so as soon as the initial board is elected, and then the transitional board goes away. And the Articles of Agreement And if you want to read them, you can go to the OE website, they're there. The stagger the terms for Bennington, Woodford, Powell, and Shaftesbury of the initial board members who get elected. And they're 3-year terms, but not for everybody. In the initial board, I think the first Bennington seat is a 1-year term and then a 3-year term.
The way they did it the last time.
Right, so you're all, familiar, so that eventually after 3 years, there'll be a rotation in order.
Any other questions? All right, thank you, Jim, for that. So only 2 items for the chair report. One, this board needs a representative to the Teachers Negotiating Committee. Jackie Brew had been fulfilling that role?
No, I was on ESP.
Jackie, I'm sorry, ESP rather. So it's
Jackie Kelly does
It's,
teachers.
so the ESP Negotiating Committee, thank you, Jackie. Jackie had been fulfilling that role for a while. She's not going to be fulfilling that role now. So if folks could give that a thought and give it some consideration.
How does that work with a disbanding?
So it's a 1-year contract that we're going to have to negotiate anyways because the statewide health insurance plan is coming in 2020. So
That
whatever
should be
would...
fairly quick.
You're right, really quick. So our current contracts are expiring now in June of 19, so we will only be negotiating for a 1-year contract. So I don't think there's a lot to negotiate, so I think that, I shouldn't tempt fate there, but I think it should be pretty straightforward negotiations. We had to settle some items that I talked about for consolidation, but those also could get deferred to, we keep everything in place for 1 year, and then when we go to negotiate a new 3-year contract, once we know what's happening with health insurance on statewide, everybody might be in a better position, because there's not a lot to bargain with right now if health insurance is off the table. So. But I may regret saying that.
Have they set meeting dates?
What was that?
Have they set meeting dates yet?
They're looking to meet on the 11th, actually, if that's...
I think Nick had sent out an
Tuesday.
email to that, hadn't he?
Yeah. I'm looking at the...
Yeah, December 11th at 5:30 is the
Yeah.
first meeting of that. So if board members could please give that a thought and let me know.
And that will not be with the support staff present or the teachers present. That's probably going to happen the following week, the week of the 17th. I think it's going to be 18th and 19th, and I forget which one is the teachers and which one is the support staff. But the 11th is just really kind of an organizational meeting. So that sounds like interest, right?
So the other thing I wanted to comment on are the trauma-informed practices that our principals are advocating for. So at the budget meeting that began at 6, our building principals spoke about the need for trauma-informed practices within the school. They're asking for positions for a social worker to be doing work in the classroom as well as in the homes, talking about a position for a board-certified behavior analyst, talking about having clinicians in the school. I think a good portion of our population maybe isn't familiar with the trauma that our kids are facing. One sort of indicator of the level of trauma that children, young children in particular, are facing, comes with the demographic of children entering into DCF custody, into state's custody. About 4 years ago, for the first time in the history of ever, children ages 0 to 5 entering into custody numbered higher than the number of adolescents coming into custody, which is not an indicator that the number of adolescents coming into custody went down, because it didn't, but that's the steep increase in number of kids, little ones, coming into custody. There are lots of factors behind that. Drug abuse, parental drug abuse being one of them, certainly not the only factor by any stretch. But the trauma that our youngest children are facing today is new. It's new. It's not in the collective experience of their parents or their grandparents or other community members. The research with regard to trauma shows that unresolved trauma leads to higher crime rates, leads to higher substance abuse rates, leads to relationship challenges, whether that's increased rates of divorce, increased rates of being perpetrators of child abuse. It leads to lower productivity in work situations, which leads to higher unemployment. And so by making this investment in providing these services for our students now, we get to take a step towards heading all that off. And whether you are the parent of a child who has gone through some measure of trauma, whether you are the neighbor of a kid who has gone through some trauma, or whether you're just a community member, I think the Bennington community as a whole will benefit if we can get these services in place. So that's my 2 cents on it. Principal Colley had said that trauma is not a lifelong thing, but it certainly can be if it's not adequately addressed young enough. And so that's a very important service that we can provide for our kids and for our community. So I hope, this will be an ongoing conversation throughout the budget season and throughout the consolidation, but I hope the voters of Bennington and the voters of all the places that get to weigh in on the budget will consider that, and will approve those positions and those line items. So.
And to the point that Donna was making earlier, it not only is helping the kids that are experiencing that, but it's also helping the rest of the children in the school because they're impacted by, what the other kids are experiencing in the classroom or the behaviors that could be coming out.
Yeah.
So it's a holistic benefit
Absolutely.
to the schools.
Yep, absolutely. So that's it for the chair report. The last agenda item is just FYI items. So we have the SVSU student enrollment for December. We're looking at 774 BSD students. We have the budget status report and the internal finance controls. Yes?
We have one other item under the superintendent's report that the superintendent didn't mention, and his finance officer just said. We talked about it in the budget time, the substitute teacher.
Oh, yes,
rates.
right.
Yeah.
I handed that out, right?
You did.
So I'm asking the board to support going to the proposed rates as presented.
I
on
make
this
the
page.
motion that we increase the substitute pay to the proposed rates that were handed out at the beginning of the meeting, which I can't find right this minute.
So,
Yes, I can.
okay.
The paraeducators to be paid $11.43 an hour, which is $80 daily. Teacher no degree, $85 daily. Teacher with associate's degree, $90 daily. Teacher with a BA degree, $100 daily, and a teacher certified, $125. And these are all good deals.
Yes. Could I have a second on that motion, please?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? I'll throw this out there because maybe there are people watching this meeting who won't necessarily check the minutes of the budget committee, of the budget meeting just before this, but the SVSU has found it difficult to get substitute teachers in classrooms. Both Hoosick Falls and the CDC have been paying higher rates, so all the subs go there first. And so these rates that Jackie Prue read off would go into effect as of January 1st, 2019, if they are approved. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you for that.
Thank you. So again, the FYI is the student enrollment, the budget status report, excuse me, and internal finance controls document, all of which were posted online. So could I please have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Could I have a second, please?
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of adjourning, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We are adjourned.